morning, Penn State fans. Happy Thanksgiving Eve. That's Thomas Frank Carr. I'm Greg Pickle. It's
I'm
BWI
sorry.
Live. It's
That's
BWI
on me.
Live. Wednesday,
That's all on
November
me.
27th. No worries, T. Frank. We are 1 day away from Thanksgiving. We are a few days away from Penn State taking on Maryland in its regular season finale at Beaver Stadium. That's Thomas Frank Carr. I'm Greg Pickle from Blue White Illustrated. Nittany Lions, 24.5-point favorite over the Terrapins for Saturday's game on 3:30, or at 3:30 rather, on the Big Ten Network. It will be Senior Day. It will be the Lions' last chance to secure their spot in the college football playoff. We're going to talk about that in a little bit. We have some recruiting news to get to, though. T. Frank and I are not your recruiting experts, but we are today. So thanks for being here with us on Wednesday, November 27th. T. Frank, how's Thanksgiving week treating you so far?
It just hasn't been yet. Like, that's really the thing, is I haven't even gotten to that part of the week yet, and that's gonna crash like a freight train tonight. Because like I do all the cooking and I try to do it like my mom did, which means we have lunch like noon, 1 o'clock, meaning I get up at like 5 a.m. to cook a turkey. I'm not complaining. I love doing all those things, but I also wouldn't mind doing a little bit of prep tonight. But we've got Penn State practice tonight, so there's a lot of stuff going on today, and some exciting news, as you mentioned, to get to from the recruiting perspective here for Penn State.
No question. So Virginia Slim, thank you for everyone in the chat. Brad, I see you. David, Steven, thank you guys for being here. Virginia Slim, we're going to get to this. This is a big part of the show later in the show. So if you can't stick with us live the whole time, or if maybe you're listening on replay or just interested in T. Frank's thoughts on Nolan Ritchie, we're going to break that down much later in today's show. But first, we got some recruiting news to get to. If you listen to Inside the Den podcast with Sean Fitz, Ryan Snyder, and T. Frank yesterday, you learned that Bryce Baker is someone Penn State has long been pursuing and is picking and ramping up its pursuit of. Bryce Baker, a 4-star quarterback, longtime North Carolina commit. Obviously, with Mac Brown now out as the Tar Heels coach, they are looking for a new coach, and he is keeping his options open. So Bryce Baker, 4-star quarterback in the class of 2025. Steve Wilfong of On3 reporting Wednesday morning that he is going to take an official visit to Penn State for the Maryland game this weekend. If you're not familiar with Baker, again, go back and listen to the Inside the Den podcast over at BlueWhiteIllustrated.com. He's really good. 6'2", 200 pounds, class of 2025 recruit, 4-star, who in the On3 industry rankings is the number 93 player overall and the number 10 quarterback in this senior class. On3's even higher on him, putting him at number 74 nationally. Does have him as the number 11 quarterback. But T. Frank, as we all know, Beckham Kritzum is in this class for Penn State at quarterback. The Lions have been keeping their options open as well, looking for possibly a second passer in this class. Baker was terrific during his senior season, an Elite 11 finalist, threw for just over 3,000 yards, 36 touchdowns to 4 interceptions. That's a fantastic ratio, obviously. Dual threat guy, 343 rushing yards, 6 touchdowns, completed over 77% of his passes, and Penn State will get a chance to host him just days before signing day. You know, his family seems to be pretty direct about the fact that North Carolina is not out of the running just because Mac Brown is no longer there. But at the same time, they have to figure out, obviously, what other options are out there should a new coaching staff come into Chapel Hill and not want to make him a part of their future plans. This guy is really good. I have a hard time believing any coaching staff would want to do that. If they do, they're probably not long for the job, even though they just got it, would be my initial blunt opinion. So we'll see if Penn State can close the deal here, but a big weekend for the Nittany Lions to try and do so ahead of next week's early signing day. T. Frank, this is one of the many things Blue White Illustrated subscribers can continue to follow over at BlueWhiteIllustrated.com. It is a busy time for recruiting, for Thanksgiving, for the football team, for the basketball, men and women, for wrestling, a lot going on. And the big news on the recruiting front this morning, one of the big news items anyway, I was talking to Ryan Snyder at like 6 o'clock this morning, and there's a lot going on between visitors and flips and this and that. And Bryce Baker, longtime North Carolina commit, quarterback, top 100 player, visiting Penn State officially this weekend, a week before signing day. Good way to start the Wednesday BWI Live show, T. Frank.
Yeah, I haven't had a chance to watch him yet. It sounds like you've had a chance to at least look at the stats and maybe flip on some highlights. I just think, you know, the turnaround here and the conversation we had yesterday on first off on this show, on the Tuesday show, to talk about this when it happened live, where Mac Brown was fired, and then to quickly get this put together where we were talking about this on, you know, the conversation is still salient over on Inside the Den, which the intro you accidentally saw here on the BWI Live show, because we've just been churning these things out over the last 12 hours. There's a lot of stuff going on, but to get him on campus, to get that visit lined up quickly, and to put your best foot forward in this final moment, it opens the door for Penn State to have the potential of having an Elite 11 finalist streak continue in recruiting. You go back to Ethan Grunkmeyer, Elite 11 finalist. Yep. Jackson Smolik, don't forget, went to the Elite 11 as well, and committed to Penn State late in the process. And then even later in the process, potential to have another Elite 11 quarterback join your class after the full recruiting. Let's just talk about the full recruiting picture here from how it played out, with Beckham Kritza joining the class in around this time. It was, I think, early November last year. And then the pursuit of Matt Zollers, the Pennsylvania quarterback. So as much as they may have liked Bryce Baker, if their number one target was Matt Zollers, an in-state quarterback, the whole thing makes sense, right? In terms of how they went to pursue these players, having Kritza on the roster, not wanting to give up on Zollers. And then now you're here with this opportunity because you've kept in contact, you've kept the lines of communication open. And, this is not a surprise in terms of, the options that he had and the relationships that he had built. Penn State is an opportunity to capitalize in a way that none of us expected, I think, 3-4 weeks ago. And by none of us, I mean none of us. Ryan and Fitz and the people that were on the inside having these conversations. Again, BlueWhiteIllustrated.com for those details. I just think that this is it's such a advantageous turn of events that isn't luck, but it is like the decision to fire Mac Brown was out of their hands. And what they call that, like, fortune is, being prepared for luck or whatever it is. This is a great example of that, and why Penn State's recruiting process is so effective to have and maintain these relationships. So, yeah, awesome opportunity for Penn State, and that news should be very good and a great sign for Penn State fans here on a Wednesday before Thanksgiving.
Yeah, so stay tuned over at BlueWhiteIllustrated.com. I want to get to one question here from Brad, who asked, would this be his last visit, or when does the window close? So here's how the recruiting calendar works. Recruits can come to obviously any campus across the country, including Penn State's this weekend, have to leave by Sunday, of course, which is how every official visit works, so no surprises there. You then have a dead period that lasts from December 2nd till December 8th, so this coming Monday till the following Sunday, Selection Sunday. And then obviously you have signing day on December 4th. And then you have a quiet period where recruits can come to campus December 9th through December 22nd. So obviously that'll be a transfer portal heavy visit time for almost every school, and you could see some high school guys mixed in there as well. But I would say the key here to answer Brad's question is simply that this is the last, obviously, regular season visit he could make, because it's the last regular weekend, rather, of the regular season. But there is opportunities for guys to make trips later, before. And again, he does not have to make a decision on this signing day either. Certainly would be preferable for Penn State. Probably would be good news for Penn State if he did. But that does not need to take place at this point in time. So we'll see how all that plays out. But obviously, very good situation for Penn State to be in. Now it just has to close the deal, and we will see if it's able to with the latest official visitor at the quarterback position to come to Penn State this year, and it comes on the final weekend of the regular season. It's BWI Live, Wednesday, November 27th. That's Thomas Frank Carr. I'm Greg Pickle. We planned to start this show up until about an hour ago. Yeah. With the latest... Yeah, go ahead, T. Frank.
I was just as one final pitch for if you want to join Blue White Illustrated for $1. This isn't the only player, according to Ryan Snyder, that he just put out as soon as we went live that has confirmed they're coming to Penn State this weekend. As you can see here, if you're watching on the YouTube channel, I have the tweet up here from Ryan. They've also added an on-3 wide receiver, ranks highly on the staff's board, coming this weekend. So another confirmation of players. This is already turned on its head from something that was like, we'll see how this turns out, maybe it'll be all right, to it feels like there's a lot more juice right now than there was 24 hours ago. So one of the things we talked about on the Lions Den when we did it is, please be understanding that this is a moment in time, and it's the information we can give you right now. It's going to change. I have a different feeling sitting here right now than I did yesterday when we had the conversation, at about 1:30 in the afternoon about how this weekend was going to play out for Penn State recruiting. And this stuff moves so fast. So I think they're doing a great job over there. And you should check it out because this information, this is the time of year to be plugged in, right? This is when the information is flowing and changing, and you're getting those hourly updates that you're always refreshing, wanting more commits, wanting more information. This is the time of year where that's actually happening. So definitely check us out.
Yeah, no doubt. We're recording this 10 a.m. Eastern time on the 27th of November, the day before Thanksgiving. You feel one way now, T. Frank, by 11:10 this morning, by 11:10 tonight, by 11:10 on Thanksgiving. We could all feel totally different about a variety of different things.
I'm going to feel really stuffed at 11:10 tomorrow. That's I'm going to be very full. That's how I'm going to feel.
Yes, no doubt about it. So stay with us over at BlueWhiteIllustrated.com and, of course, here on the BWI YouTube channel. Recruiting updates, team news. It's senior day coming up for Penn State. The Nittany Lions are, again, about a 4-touchdown favorite. Or, I'm sorry, three and change touchdown favorite over Maryland, 4 scores. And for Penn State, it stayed at number 4 in the college football playoff rankings, which came out, of course, on Tuesday night. We're going to show you first how the seeding looked yesterday. So Oregon number 1, Ohio State number 2, Texas 3, Penn State and Notre Dame round out the top 5. You have Indiana dropping to number 10 after losing to Ohio State. Georgia now at number 7. Alabama, after getting blown out of Oklahoma, goes to number 13. Penn State still has that ranked win over Illinois, the Fighting Illini, sitting at number 23 in this week's rankings. Notre Dame, 1 spot behind Penn State, has a ranked win over Texas A&M. They, of course, have Texas, the number 3 Longhorns, and the Aggies meet during rivalry week. So I guess before we get to how the bracket would shake out, T. Frank, when I look at how the college football playoff rankings played out, the big question for, I think, a lot of people outside of the committee room was Notre Dame possibly jumping Penn State. Yeah. Fighting Irish have, without question, one of the worst losses of the year, 16-14 to Northern Illinois at home in September. MAC team that is not one of the, it's not a standout stellar MAC team by any stretch of the imagination. Not the worst one. That's
They're
Kent
no
State,
Bowling Green.
That's right. Yes. And there's certainly no Akron or Kent State kind of right in the middle. But, a lot of people thought Notre Dame, winner of 9 straight games since then, I believe it is, and multiple wins by more than 20 points. I think everyone's been double digits at this point. So since that loss, so they certainly have taken care of business. But like some other teams, including Penn State, you only have 1 ranked win in there. So it will be interesting to see how this final weekend impacts the final rankings. Because right now, Penn State ahead of Notre Dame. The Fighting Irish go to USC, a 7.5-point favorite at the Coliseum this weekend. A game that obviously the committee will use as a way to compare Penn State and Notre Dame because it's a common opponent. We assume Penn State takes care of business. We assume Notre Dame does. Can the Fighting Irish still jump the Nittany Lions? Yes. Is it likely? Depends how things play out this weekend. If Notre Dame beats USC by 40, or even 21 or 24, or somewhere between 20 and 30, I think it's possible, regardless of what Penn State does against Maryland. I know that's going to get the chat fired up probably, but I'm telling you, they left the door open. Ward Manuel, the selection committee chair, left the door open last night for that to be a possibility. Again, I'm not calling it likely. Possible? Absolutely.
Yeah. What was the feedback on that? Given how Army, a ranked team. And you can say what you want about Army and kind of their general long-term view of how a team like that does in a playoff and kind of stacks up against teams that they just play such a unique style of football, right? And so like that conversation, I think, always should have an asterisk or a caveat. At the same time, Notre Dame has been statistically great and has done some of the things Penn State fans want Penn State to do, which is blow some teams out. So I guess, What are you expecting? And what was the conversation about around that?
Yeah, I mean, essentially, Army drops out of the top 25, so Notre Dame blew them out, and in the process, did not get a ranked win out of it anymore, which is kind of funny to think how that all plays out. But at any rate, they both have 1 ranked win. Both teams have taken care of business. Obviously, Penn State's loss is to a top 5 team in the country, and Notre Dame's is not, and that's really, I think, the big thing that differentiates those two. Obviously, right now, there's no. I'm not, telling you anything you don't know from that perspective. But I do think that, again, they left the door open for the committee to possibly jump Notre Dame over Penn State this week, depending on how things play out. And I don't really know how much it matters. If Penn State beats Maryland by 50, maybe it doesn't matter what Notre Dame does at USC. But I just feel like they're going to use whatever the outcome is there, one way or the other, to justify their final decision to either move Notre Dame ahead or keep Penn State ahead. So
don't forget, Maryland beat USC.
That's right.
So,
right.
Common opponent of a common opponent. Who knows?
Yeah. There's a lot to
This is all ridiculous, Greg.
It is.
This whole
No,
thing
it
is ridiculous.
It is. There's no doubt. And again, I understand that college football is a TV product. There's no doubt about that. That's why we have Big Noon Kickoff. That's why we have a ranking show every week leading up to the Selection Sunday. That's why Ward Manuel, selection committee chair, has to get on and defend the decision-making of a 13-person group, even though he's just one person, and may not agree with everything you see come out of that committee room down in Texas. So, it is, but it's what everyone signed up for. That's just, at the end of the day, everyone signed up for all the TV dollars they could get across the NCAA, schools, conferences, so on and so forth. And this is what you get for it. You want the money, you got to give them something in return. That stuff is Big Noon Kickoff. That stuff is weekly ranking show that we sit here and pick apart and do think is ridiculous, like many other people do. But at any rate, time will tell. There will be one more ranking show next Tuesday, and then we will have, obviously, Selection Sunday following Conference Championship Saturday. So we're getting there, T. Frank. At this point, if the season ended today, I am going to have to click here, but there we go. The bracket would look like this if you're watching on YouTube, but I'll read it. If you're listening to the podcast, you would have Oregon, Texas, Miami, and Boise State getting the 4 byes, Notre Dame hosting SMU, Penn State hosting Indiana, Ohio State hosting Arizona State, and Georgia hosting Tennessee. Obviously, the one we're going to spend time on here is the possible Penn State-Indiana matchup. That would be an 11 seed at the number 6 seed if the season ended today, which it, of course, does not. And I think a lot of people are wondering, is that the best possible matchup Penn State could get here? Most people seem to think it's either SMU or Indiana in terms of who you'd want to draw in the first round. I have a hard time getting too far in the weeds with this conversation because I think it's much like we had this conversation, Ryan Snyder and I, for a while back during August and September. Like, who would you want the Phillies to play in the playoffs if you could make your choice? And to me, it's just baseball and Major League Baseball and college football are two obviously very different things. Penn State would be a touchdown at least favorite over Indiana, maybe even double digits by offset. And same thing with SMU, but you just don't know. There's a lot of different factors that go into it. Number one, you might pick a better first-round situation for yourself. If you're really trying to, game theory this, I guess you would say, you might pick a better first-round matchup for yourself that might lead to a worse second-round matchup for yourself. So,
well, yeah. You look at that bracket.
Part of the equation, right?
The only thing you don't have is how you feel about Miami. And obviously, what you're saying here is matchups matter. How the strengths of these teams in the playoff matchup matter. So let's just talk about Penn State's strength. Defense, pass defense has been good other than last week. And then, offense has been okay. Well, Miami has a bad defense, and they have a very good passing game. I don't know too much about their running game, but generally Penn State's very good against the run game. So if you're looking at that matchup, you get through the Indiana game, and then you've got one where you feel like even if Miami scores points on you, you feel like in that one you could return volley. And so these things have changed every single week. But if the season ended today, and generally where we're seeing Penn State line up in these things, they are angling for a pretty favorable path where you could say, you don't want to get too far ahead of yourself, but the matchups feel good. Also, if you want to put it up again, this is angling to be a Big Ten heavy situation as well. Just looking at this playoff picture where you've got Oregon as the 1 seed and Ohio State as a 5 seed in different brackets. The top 3 teams in the Big Ten aren't going to face each other until potentially the semifinal or final round. You might have a Big Ten versus Big Ten championship game. You might have, these are all theoretical, but just the way the Big Ten has been represented in this, I think is also consistent and indicative of how the playoff committee feels about the strength of the Big Ten in general and the strength of these individual teams. So just some interesting things that, came out of last night, that things will change and some things may change drastically, but so far many things haven't. So the closer we get, the more these are narrowing down, and I think the picture is a little bit clearer than we're expecting now. The conference championship games and this final weekend are going to determine a lot of that, obviously.
There's no doubt about it. Penn State in a position to host a college football playoff game, which going into the season, if you would have said Penn State, if you would have told it, most Penn State fans, including all of you here on BWI Live show, and thank you for being with us, whether you're live or listening on replay, but think most of you all would have taken 11-1 and a home playoff game at Beaver Stadium to kick off the 12-team college football playoff era if offered that back in August. So Penn State, of course, is not out of the running to make the Big Ten title game. It's an extreme long shot to do so. Needs Michigan to beat Ohio State this Saturday in the Horseshoe, and then also Penn State beat Maryland. Not likely to happen, obviously. I think Ohio State is a 3-touchdown favorite in that game. And certainly no one expects the Wolverines to go on the road and win that game. But, hey, crazier things have happened, T. Frank.
Yesterday, I was just going to say, thanks to Facebook, I found out yesterday was the 8th anniversary of the 2016 game, not beating Ohio State, but clinching the Big Ten championship game where Penn State beat Michigan State, and then Ohio State lost to Michigan at the end of that year. So, yeah, we've been in similar situations, but we felt very different about Ohio State going into that game than we do Ohio State going into this game. So some obvious differences. I think Ohio State was even at home in that one, just based on the photo they were wearing their home jerseys. So it just crazy things have happened, but this one feels like a much bigger long shot. I'm not trying to stoke anybody's hope or anything. Just fun to remember when. One of the few times where Facebook has brought up those memories, and I'm not cringing at something I said 10 years ago and being like, oh, this is terrible. Why did I ever have access to the internet in my 20s? That's just a terrible idea.
Yes, well, we're thankful that we have it now. There's no question about that. So Penn State will find out its final spot again, not until next Sunday, December 8th. We'll find out where it is in the final college football playoff field. But certainly it has business to take care of this weekend. We're going to get more into that in just a little bit. But for the college football playoff conversation, I think that pretty much sums things up. Just to be clear, yes, Beaver Stadium is ready and able to host a college football playoff first-round home game. They took care of the work necessary to do so last year. Obviously, there's a lot to still figure out there in terms of a lot of the logistical stuff that's just not out there yet. I mean, just not a lot of info. I mean, I know that for season ticket holders and for students, there was a ticket reservation, I believe the word was used, deadline and things like that. But, obviously this day that the game is played, it could be Friday night. It could be at 1 of 3 times on Saturday should Penn State host a first-round playoff game or just playing it, period, which, again, looks likely at the moment. But just a lot of logistical things to still figure out here how all of it's going to work. But obviously Penn State is worried first and foremost about knocking out Maryland. We're going to talk more about them in the second half of the show. But T. Frank, some very special people and businesses are bringing today's episode of the BWI Live show to all of our listeners. We are thankful for all of our listeners and thankful for these 2 great sponsors. Let's tell everyone about them.
Yeah, the first one we're going to get to today is Rothrock Wood Project, which is a local company here that they procure local trees that would have otherwise been discarded and turn them into absolutely beautiful pieces of furniture and things that can become heirlooms in your family. They could create pieces with epoxy and trees and bring you a lot of these really cool, and I use this word lightly, trendy sort of styles in what they do. And the cool thing is for Penn State fans, again, this is a part of Center County. This is a part of State College. They've signed a deal with the State College borough, so they are going to get trees from the area that are cut down for, disease or municipal growth or part of the, the growth plan, whatever the reason might be. They're going to get those and they're going to turn those into pieces that you can own. That's really cool. So if you loved going downtown or you loved a certain part of town and you had an apartment out on Westerly Parkway and there's a tree that came down that you used to sit under and read a book, that could be your dining table in the future. So check out Rothrock Wood Project on Instagram and Facebook. The cool thing is if you're local or if you're not local and you want to come out and hang out in Bellefonte, they're going to have an open house on December 7th. So barring Penn State being in the Big Ten championship game, I'm going to be there because I love going and checking this stuff out myself. This is a passion of mine, and woodworking and epoxy tables and stuff like this I find super cool and fascinating. So 11 to 5 on December 7th, they're going to have an open house, so you can go see the stuff for yourself. And I'm just going to put this up here. These are examples of tables they've made. From walnut to hickory to oak, whatever you like, whatever your style might be, they can make a table for you with all these custom colors. And the cool thing is, if you're a Penn State fan, you can have a Penn State themed room. So that's really cool. I find all of that fascinating, and something that I think if you really want to invest in furniture and something that you're going to love, quality matters, and Rothrock Wood Project, that's what they deliver. So again, Scott at rothrockwoodproject.com if you want to check that out, or December 7th open house, 11 to 5 p.m. Also, today's show is brought to you by My Perfect Franchise. I always appreciate My Perfect Franchise and Andy Ludicky. It's great, Greg, that we got some recruiting content on the show because he loves recruiting, which is why he's usually on the Thursday show. So this might be new for you if you don't watch the Thursday show. If you're not into recruiting, you might be somebody that Andy can help. My Perfect Franchise is his consulting company that helps place you in a franchise to own and create your own wealth and your own American dream. Whether things are booming in the economy, there's a downturn, it doesn't matter because there's always something happening. There's something growing, changing, and he's got his finger on the pulse of what's good right now in franchise management, where you buy into a corporate structure, but you own the individual franchise. So you have that support of a successful business, but you are running it. He also has a business where you can buy a small business in your town. If you want to do that, he'll go through the P&L. He'll go through all the things so you understand what you're getting yourself into. But all the things, here's just a rundown of things you can ask him about if you give him a call. Kids sports, camps are huge right now, and you can run camps. So if you love sports and you love teaching kids, and that can be a business for you if you understand how to do those things. Health, beauty, wellness, the medical sector. Greg, am just reading off a script. You need to go talk to Andy, 404-973-9901 to get more information and to actually know what I'm talking about. Andy at myperfectfranchise.net. Appreciate him being a sponsor here on the show.
Thank you all for being with us. It's BWI Live Wednesday, November 27th, a day before Thanksgiving Eve. If you're going out tonight, be safe, enjoy it. If you're traveling, be safe and enjoy that as well, as many people, of course, hit the road for the holiday and for Penn State, Maryland this weekend. T. Frank, you will be traveling later today to the Lash Building in Haluba Hall for Penn State practice. Did you like that? Did that work for you?
It was wonderful. Wonderful.
Yes. Penn State will open a portion of practice. It's a little bit earlier than normal, so it's going to open for the media right around 3. James Franklin will talk around 5, those times Eastern, of course. Usually it's more like 5 and 6:30. I tell you that because if you want to see everything James Franklin has to say after practice, be sure to check in here on the BWI YouTube channel. What do you think, T. Frank? Around like 6? Does that sound right?
Oh, no, like
maybe a little sooner.
If it's 5:10, it'll be up by 5:20 at the latest. I literally sit on the ground at Haluba and I put it into the computer and then get it on the internet. It's up almost immediately, basically as soon as he's done talking.
All right, very good. So you'll be over there for that. What do you want to see at practice? Let me just start with that. What do you want to see when you go over there? Assuming it's cold out, they might be outside, could be inside. What are you looking for?
Yeah, I've stopped trying to predict whether they're going to be inside or outside based on what's happening right now because the weather changes so much within 4 or 5 hours. Although it is closer, right, because it's the middle of the day. I'm wondering what the tenor of practice is going to be. They're moving it up, as James talked about on Monday, because they're trying to do their Thanksgiving stuff tonight and give the players as much time as possible to be with their family on Thanksgiving or to just generally celebrate and have the holiday in the middle of a work week, right? They can't change anything in terms of the amount of prep they have to do and the focus they have on Maryland, but also acknowledge that this is a grind and these kids have been doing this since August, and the attention span, like, you need to give them a break every once in a while from a mental perspective to allow them to be people for a minute. So what's the tone at practice? How much do they keep focus, especially in front of us? I don't want to say it's orchestrated and it's not like but there are certain elements of that. So generally, what is the tone? And then obviously the health situation. I always do a quick jog down to the offensive line because they're together at the beginning of our viewing period, and we can see first, second string, who's moving, who's in practice. Anthony Donko not being there is massive. We know who's going to be in his place with Nolan Rucci on that first line, and then presumably JB Nelson behind him. But how does that look? How does that feel? And what does that do to the rest of the lineup? Because I'm sure now that this is the plan, they might have to long-term move some things around to get the best possible 5 and the best possible 2 deep. Now that that's an actual, this is the reality going forward, I'm curious to see. We won't see a ton of that, but we will get to see some of those inklings because they have to do some stuff in front of us.
Correct. And so we will see what I'm just stuck on this thing here. If you can tell me where you're finding USC minus 4.5, there is no place on earth that Notre Dame's getting 4.5 points. But if there is, please tell me. I will leave the show right now and go make it a Merry Christmas for myself before Thanksgiving if that line's out there somewhere. So please, if you do have a line out, if we're just looking at a comment here, if you're listening to the podcast, let me know. So a couple of things in terms of practice tonight. We're at the time of year where, as you mentioned, things are dialed back a considerable amount compared to where they were earlier in the year. As you note, you still have to get all your game planning done, get all your reps in, things like that. But certainly for the veteran guys, you can take some reps off of them during this time of the year. It's not opponent-based. Penn State has been doing this for weeks, obviously, to get to, it's not just because they're a huge favorite over Maryland and it's Thanksgiving week. I know some people just want to make that clear in case anyone's wondering. But the injury situation obviously is not ideal for Penn State to lose a starting right tackle at this moment in time. And then also, you lose a key backup that Penn State has used a lot in recent weeks, and Alonzo Ford Jr. I know you guys talked about it a good bit on the show yesterday, T. Frank, so I don't want to go too far into the weeds, but man, has Penn State's defensive tackle depth become extremely scary. At the time of year when you don't want that to be the case. Yeah, and I'm curious, and this is going to be the conversation we have when we talk about Nolan Rucci and some of the Sunday film study about that. It just makes sense to group those in my mind, but it is the main thing that I want to know from James Franklin is about these adjustments. First off, can you run the offense you want with Nolan Rucci at right tackle, with no exceptions, or do you have to augment your game plan? Do you have to do certain things to help him? And then on the defensive tackle side, do you shorten the bench? Because you've been getting very good play from Zane Durant, and unfortunately, you've been getting the second best play of the team at defensive tackle from Alonzo Ford. So is it down to just 3? Or do you have to add in, are you now forced to add in a 4th defensive tackle that is a redshirt freshman? Somebody maybe at this point, are they ready to play? Did they need another offseason of seasoning? What's that picture like going forward? I don't think we're going to see the answer because as many guys as they can play against Maryland, they're going to play. And it's going to be cycled in. If it's anything like the game against Purdue, they are going to, even in the first half, once they establish some sort of command of the game, cycle in some of these guys that are second or third string players. So I don't think we're going to get a good view before we hit the postseason, barring anything major, right, Greg? Like there's always the wild card of the things that we expect to happen don't happen. And then from tonight, that defensive side of the ball, Denine Sutton, is he healthy? There are more questions, good and bad. Mecca Engineer, I think every single show has been like, where's Keon Wiley? Where's Keon Wiley? Where's Keon Wiley? It's a great question. And if he's working his way back in, is that a positive development? Do they get some relief in that situation? And we get glimpses of that on the defensive side, although I've been with the defense half of a practice the entire year. So, Fitz is the guy to talk to about that, and he'll have that for you after practice today. Yeah, so check out practice notes over at BlueWhiteIllustrated.com. We'll see what Julian Fleming is up to. He warmed up and looked perfectly fine out in Minneapolis and did not play. So we'll see where things go there after he was not seen in practice last week. We'll see if he's there tonight. But again, this time of the year, I just urge everyone to not get too far into the weeds worrying about who's there and who's not. Sometimes it matters. Sometimes it's just a veteran rest day. Sometimes guys need, got reps before we walked in and then went and did rehab, recovery, whatever it is they do during the portion of practice that we are there. So this conversation, Greg, is keeps bleeding over, and I always the problem is I always save the good stuff for last. That's how I eat Thanksgiving as well. But Virginia Slim says they're playing Denine inside more now. That will likely continue on pass rushing downs. Sure, that's where they play him inside. They don't play him inside on as many rundowns, at least from my recollection off the top of my head. I could be wrong about that, but I don't remember seeing him inside on standard downs. Third down packages, yes, but I mean you have 0 defensive tackles with their hand in the dirt sometimes on third down packages. So that's a conversation that I think is a tough one, because if you're going to borrow depth from defensive end, you don't have great depth there either. Penn State has had depth issues across the defense, safety, defensive end, defensive tackle. I'm not really sure anyone thought Uriah Fisher would be back by now as well, so I'm not sure where that came from, but would not expect
the unrealistic standard that he set last time.
Right? No, I get it. No, I certainly get it, Virginia Slim, but no, we're not at that point. It's the best as we can tell. Nothing new there on that front to report. And so, yeah, it's going to be an interesting week for Penn State, both at practice and, of course, on game day. Let's keep in mind, too, that this is a team that has, at times this year, struggled to build a big enough lead to get its starters out sooner than it has. That has certainly actually been the case at home more than it maybe has been on the road. So we'll see if Penn State can do that. But at the same time, as we keep talking about, it's not like I guess the question becomes when you have depth issues at a number of positions. The good news is that you have a lot of guys. I just realized I didn't do the redshirt report yet this week. We'll get to that at BlueWhiteIllustrated.com sometime before kickoff. But Penn State is in a position where they have a lot of guys who can play in this game that are freshmen. Mm-hmm. And not use, and come anywhere close to using a year of eligibility. The question just becomes how many of those guys are actually ready for a Big Ten game, no matter if it's Maryland or not. Maryland, of course, is a team. I don't even know if I texted you about this, but Mike Locksley did talk yesterday, so I'll just hit on this real quick. I think this is probably a good spot.
Yeah,
to do that.
We didn't add it in the rundown. So what did he have to say?
That's okay. Well, whatever. The recruiting news kind of just turned the show on its head, but that's good because obviously Penn State would prefer to be in a position of hosting a 4-star quarterback for an official visit, as it will this weekend. So when you look at Mike Locksley's Tuesday news conference, not a ton to note, but the obvious thing here is that this is a pass-driven Terrapins team, and it does not know who its quarterback is going to be on Saturday. And it thinks starter Billy Edwards Jr., who has been hurt, it sounds like pretty much all season in some way, shape, or form, will probably try and give it a go. If he's not able to, MJ Morris is going to play. Certainly the backup for a reason down in College Park. So it's going to be a tough go for Maryland any way you slice this because, again, they are a pass-heavy team that has questions at quarterback. I like the receivers a lot. Won't surprise me if they make a few plays against Penn State, especially in the first half, as the Lions. Typically, if they're going to give those up, it's going to be in the first half. But not a whole lot to me to worry about. I think there's probably some other injuries Maryland's dealing with as well. You have to wonder what the mindset is of this team. It cannot go to a bowl game. It just lost pretty handily and got just mauled on the ground at home against Iowa on senior day last week in front of 20 people, friends and family in College Park. So you just have to wonder where the mindset of this team is as it plays its final game of the 2024 season, and if there's any guys who will not make the trip because of plans to enter the portal and who's hurt and been trying to play through it and will no longer try to do so. So just a lot of questions facing Maryland this weekend that are not good questions to be facing from Mike Locksley and his staff. And so for Penn State, again, you just got to take care of business. No matter what happens at noon between Ohio State and Michigan, I don't want to say that result is completely irrelevant, but it's close to it, especially because we assume it's going to go the way of the Buckeyes, which will eliminate Penn State from Big Ten title game contention. That's irrelevant. Right now, the focus should be on and is on winning and securing a spot in not just the college football playoff, but in the top 8, which would, of course, mean a home game is coming to Beaver Stadium in round 1. But that was the big takeaway from Mike Locksley's news conference. Very complimentary of Penn State's players. Loves Tyler Warren. Loves, multiple guys. Yeah, if you've watched any other opposing coach news conference before a Penn State game, he played all the hits. So the biggest takeaway was his quarterback situation. And at this point, obviously it's early in the week still, and they don't know what's going to happen.
Yeah, and honestly, I don't think it matters. Whatever advantage you can get in this game to make this as not of a game as possible is absolutely the thing to do. If Billy Edwards doesn't play, great. No one's going to be like, well, Maryland wasn't at full strength when they won 56-7. Nobody cares. Just the easiest possible outcome is what you should be rooting for Penn State. There's no final test here. There's no final thing to learn. We have now crossed that threshold. It is just get to the offseason or to the postseason as healthy as possible. So yeah, those things in Penn State's advantage. If you can snowball in a game and not having a quarterback on a pass-heavy team, having to alter that plan is absolutely the number one thing Penn State should hope for. And we've seen them do this, right? Teams that are vulnerable at quarterback that coming into a game have been very vulnerable coming out of that game I'm thinking about Kent State and some of the things that happened early in the year with Penn State's pass rush. So I think that's an obvious opportunity for Penn State to do what we've been talking about, which is get an early lead and snowball the game so they can get their young guys in, and they can as much as they can ensure that their starters don't get hurt.
Exactly. That is right. So the parking passes, if you are a Penn State season ticket holder, it sounds like the parking pass email to reserve yours for the college football playoffs should Penn State host a first-round game has come out. So if you're interested, if you're obviously on that list, check that out. Looks like it's $190 for a reserved parking pass and $90 for a preferred pass, which is quite salty. But keep in mind, there's a reason for that. The college football playoff gets all gate revenue. Penn State gets everything else. So it is not getting any ticket money from the first round playoff game. So it's going to make it up through parking. So I believe that ticket cost probably puts it, the ticket cost in line with what a game ticket cost. So yeah, I'm sure that's going to be a hot and heavy topic discussed throughout Nittany Nation today, but just wanted to throw that out there if you are on the reserved parking pass list, or if you are someone thinking of buying on the secondary market. Unlike a lot of other times, good luck trying to find a parking pass that is reasonable, because they probably are going to soak you. All right, that is not the point of the next segment of this BWI Live show on November 27th. It's Thomas Frank Carr. I'm Greg Pickle from BlueWhiteIllustrated.com. It is Sunday film study time, and as you all can imagine, we are going to focus this heavily on the trenches and what Penn State does moving forward after James Franklin revealed, somewhat to me surprisingly, considering how this season has gone, with we're not talking about injuries. If we are going to talk about injuries, don't ask me until Wednesday. If we're going to get to Wednesday, I might not have an update yet, so on and so forth. Monday, as everyone knows, he revealed that Alonzo Ford, the defensive tackle, and Anthony Donko, starting right tackle, both dealing with long-term injuries.
So if you're James Franklin, this is the last game before you get into the offseason, and like these things will be obvious, and he's going to be asked again on Wednesday if he doesn't answer it on Monday. And also, just the way those played out, it seemed fairly obvious that like there wasn't going to be a lot of, oh, well, let's wait and see. We don't really know. Like it seemed, just the look on Anthony Donko's face was pretty telling. And again, trying not to speculate about these things while also having a reasonable conversation about what we all saw with our own eyes, and we've all watched football for a long time, so we kind of get the clues about what happened. So I think maybe just the time of year and the situation did result in a different opportunity. But I've stopped trying to figure out how James Franklin wants to handle this stuff a while ago.
Yeah, with good reason. So let's talk about something you have figured out, and that's how Nolan Rucci played at Minnesota. He played, obviously, Anthony Donko was hurt on the game's second play. Nolan Rucci came in.
Yeah.
Penn State in a different situation than I would say most college football teams would be at this point in time, because it did use Rucci, because Donko's been in and out of the lineup with injuries all year. That is certainly a situation that most teams probably have not found themselves in, and fortunate, of course, to not have found themselves in. But for Penn State, T. Frank, the reps he got throughout this season certainly put him in position to be the best he could be on Saturday at Minnesota. And I'm curious to see, after watching all of those snaps at Huntington Bank Stadium, what'd you learn about how he played?
So I've been following Nolan this year, watching him from early in the season to now. And a couple things are pretty clear. Better run blocker than he is a pass protector. His pass protection has gotten much better. So a couple of things that we've talked about here on the show, and I've talked about at BlueWhiteIllustrated.com, is he had a strong tendency every single time he made contact to duck his head, to lunge, to reach out, to duck his head, to lose balance. I only saw him do that once against Minnesota. So significant improvement in terms of how he's playing. That's the good news. The bad news is the problems that are there are still there, in terms of the fact that he's 6'8", 310 or something like that, and doesn't have the lower body strength or the overall power in his frame to be a difference maker in a couple of different areas. And I also think that the cat and mouse game that played out between Penn State and Minnesota went good and bad for Penn State. So I'm going to write about this at some point, maybe on Friday, at BlueWhiteIllustrated.com, giving like a full scouting report. So I don't want to talk about all the details right now, but they attacked Nolan Rucci in this game. They specifically did things both like in the first half to attack what they thought was a weakness. He gave up one sack, and then they spammed the same play repeatedly. And so after that stopped working, they started putting their best pass rusher on him, and the offense had to adapt. And that was the biggest thing that I took away in this game. And it's funny how, like, you know what's happened, but you don't exactly know the why. So just as a full transparency here for everyone, I'm watching all these plays. I don't know what the play is. Like, I don't know what the concept that Penn State is trying to run. So I'm trying to diagnose what the run play is or the pass play is. And then I'm trying to understand what it's going up against and how the players performed in that environment on a general sense. I rarely ever go into individual players and do like a full breakdown of one player other than basically the quarterback who's involved in every single play. A lot of Aller's game was absolutely influenced by Nolan Ritchie being at right tackle. So that puts new context to his performance and how he was, I think, a little bit more uneven and maybe a little bit uncertain about his pass protection. And maybe he rushed things a little bit. I don't think it was the fact that it was a night game or another big game. I think it was he was trying to help out Nolan Ritchie and help out his offensive line, who were not playing well in pass protection in the first half in a game where the plan was to throw the football. Right. So the interior of the offensive line actually was more of a problem than Nolan Ritchie, but they were solving some of the problems that Ritchie was having, which could have been catastrophic, by getting the ball out quickly. And then in the second half, they adapt, they give him more help, and there are very few drop back passes. So they had to go with the game plan. It happened on the second play of the game.
Right.
They had to go with the game plan that they came in the first half. And then at halftime, they adjusted the plan to the personnel they had, which led to a lot of the feelings that Jordan Lawrence in the chat of asking, are they putting handcuffs on Drew Aller? It's like, if your quarterback is a passer and you're trying to pass the football and your plan is to pass the football, but you feel like you have a major weakness somewhere, and maybe it's not even the player himself, but just schematically, then you should adapt your game to win the game. And I think that's a major point about how Penn State played and stopped throwing the ball specifically to the wide receivers in the second half. I think that's just seeing it in the light that I did. It's almost like one of those moments where you want to beat your head on the wall and be like, how did I not put those two things together?
Right. And so Penn State will have to deal with all of that moving forward. Should not be a huge deal against Maryland. Will be something somebody, assuming things go as expected this weekend, will be something someone's going to get multiple weeks to scheme for and try and use against Penn State, which will be the cat and mouse game that happens in the postseason. Is that Penn State will have, this is not a one-game issue for Penn State, or a one-game puzzle, I think is probably a better way to put it for Penn State. They're going to have to solve this puzzle each week. That's obvious, goes without saying. But, again, you're going to your backup right tackle at a crucial time of the year. So we'll see. Nolan Ritchie been widely praised by people within the program throughout the course of this season, T. Frank. But obviously what happens moving forward is what his first year in State College will be defined by.
And that's just not fair. Like, it's
not, but it's the reality.
Fair.
Yeah, I agree.
He's done a lot to improve, and I just want to give him credit, because some guys just don't, even if they have the effort, they don't have whatever it is to when they're in a stressful situation, improve. And I saw him with so number 17 for Minnesota was a really good edge rusher and was the one guy on that roster that caused him problems. So that's a good sign. Like, there's one guy that can go after Ritchie and could win consistently and be a real problem. Will they face a team that has that one thing that can be a cheat code against the passing game? Sure. Yes, they could absolutely face that going forward. But they'll be prepared for it now. The real thing that is, I think, unfortunate is that he's done a lot of good technical work and has done a lot of good improving to the point that I think he's actually a good offensive lineman, where he can be successful. If he had to play next year, I would be very encouraged that he could play up to the level of, near Anthony Donko, even though Donko is a special sort of player from a power and explosive strength perspective. If he adds 10 pounds this offseason of strong, lean muscle and, gets up to 320 or whatever transforms his body, then he can be a difference maker and can be everything you want him to be as a 6'8" offensive tackle. It's not going to happen before the playoff, though. Right. So he is functionally what he is, and he's going to improve on the details and just being consistently in the right position and not making mistakes. His run blocking, his drive blocking on outside zones specifically, I think is good. He has some really good movement and quickness in the run game that got wins. Of the linemen in that game, I would not make him the number one problem in the offense. I would say that that's not the case. Now, were there schematic things they had to work around and they made it so that was the reality? I'll concede that. But based on performance, I had more problems with guys that were playing on the interior than I did with Nolan Rucci. So I think that in itself is a positive sign going forward, and why I'm encouraged that they could find a path forward where he works and the offense works with him in it.
Thoughts on Penn State? So Rucci was a swing guy for them, obviously a guy who played backup reps. Thoughts on what Penn State does with Cooper Cousins, with Javen Williams, with JB Nelson moving forward, not just for Maryland, but also in the playoff?
I think it gets pretty desperate after Nolan Rucci and Drew Shelton. So you like the tackle depth and potential for the future. But when we talk about who's ready right now, you're now having the conversation of, do you move Drew Shelton back over to the right side if anything else happens? And now you got Javen Williams and Drew Shelton. And just generally, no team can sustain losing multiple starters on the offensive line. So that's not what we're going to be focusing on, but it does now eat at the depth. And I think at one point, JB Nelson probably was a quality swing offensive lineman. He played tackle before he got to Penn State, albeit, at Lackawanna, but he does have that certain level of athleticism. I don't know if that player exists right now, but what it does immediately is it elevates Cooper Cousins into a sixth offensive lineman situation where realistically you're going to be playing him more at this point. James Franklin talked about Javen Williams and having all these guys having an increased role. I just if you're getting to that point, we're having a different conversation about, hey, this was a great season for you guys, but you just can't overcome this. So Cooper Cousins playing more legitimate snaps in the game in the postseason, I think is on the table now. And his improvement as a run blocker has been great. His improvement as a pass protector has to improve if they're going to have that flexibility, because I think he's the guy that inserts if JB Nelson goes to right tackle. And now you have two. That doesn't feel good.
No, certainly not. Speaking of things that don't feel good, Penn State's defensive tackle depth. Let's flip to the other side of the line for Penn State.
I'm always amazed, Greg. I'm sorry. I'm always amazed at the conversations going on in the chat. There is an entirely different show
I was
going on in the chat.
I was actually just looking at that thinking, man, there's a long Drew Aller conversation going on amid this offensive line talk in the chat. Well, we appreciate you all. Whatever you're talking about in there. Thanks for being here with us. Hey, so defensive tackle, bit of a problem for Penn State right now. Alonzo Ford, long-term injury. Hakeem Beamon, no longer on the team. Penn State has obviously its top three in Devon J. Thomas, Zane Durant, and Keziah Izzard. After that, good luck parsing what is left of the Penn State defensive tackle room to figure out who your number 4 defensive tackle is at this moment in time.
It's pretty clear, but it's also not a great sign where Ty Blanding has played the best and he's been given the most realistic opportunities. 292-pound redshirt freshman. I think he could be a good one for Penn State. I love his movement skills. He's in that mold of Zane Durant. And again, the conversation is not he's Zane Durant, but his body type and skills at his skill level. If he were to play well, it would feel similar to Zane Durant as a movement and power through contact guy more than a dominate at the point of attack. The interesting thing is, if you're going like for like in terms of replacement, and I know Alonzo Ford has trimmed down a little bit, but I'm sorry, Caleb Artis. Caleb Artis would be the guy who's 2022, so he's a redshirt sophomore, and a guy who is 6'3", 315, 320 pounds, has more of that size. But I mean, he's been on the D squad all year, so now that's the conversation we're having, because I know they talk about Xavier Gilliam. And I have only seen a little bit so far this year, but when I saw him go up against offensive linemen that weren't Kent State, I was concerned, because, you might be the right size, but have you developed the right level of strength to play meaningful snaps? And I feel like it's a little, again, kind of like the Nolan Rucci conversation, going to be a good football player. Is it a little too early? We'll find out together. Now, I think you have a better feeling about that happening now than if it had happened in September. But you still are in that situation when the stakes get higher, and now these things are revealed. It just also, Greg, I don't know how to have this conversation, but the decision by Hakeem Beamon and the reality that he's no longer with the program, and then have this news happen like 3 weeks later is just like, there's something like a Greek tragedy or a comedy about that. He was the team's 5th defensive tackle. And I imagine that had something to do with the fact that he was the team's number 2 defensive tackle last year. And he would be playing in the playoff.
Right.
He would be in the lineup now.
Right.
And I don't know how to have that conversation. But it is a fact, and it is kind of ironic or wild or crazy or however you want to phrase it.
It most certainly is. And obviously Penn State is finding itself now in a position where it cannot lose any more defensive tackle depth. Yeah, you have Smith Vilbert listed at 282. You can slide him in sometimes. You can slide 260-plus pound Denai Dennis Sutton down at times. But long story short is that Penn State is in a position now at defensive tackle where it just simply cannot look at any more injuries or otherwise loss of players there for the remainder of this season. T. Frank, we're coming down the home stretch of BWI Live, November 27th. We hope everyone has a great Thanksgiving. Obviously, we hope you enjoy some content over at BlueWhiteIllustrated.com. We're going to have a lot of it, despite that it's a holiday. We will have plenty of coverage over there. NFL will be in full swing, and I'm looking at the chat. You guys are on fire today. Everyone's wound up. Everyone's trying to get to Thanksgiving Eve happy hour, I think, and just pushing through that last work day. So we appreciate everybody being here. Final thoughts, T. Frank, as we get ready to wrap things up here. Any other Sunday film study points we missed or anything you want to cover before we head on out of here on Wednesday?
I'm trying to remember, like, just generally from the Sunday film study, you should go check it out. Defensively, I think that Minnesota had a really good plan, and it might change how certain teams literally attack Penn State instead of being conservative in the third quarter. This is something I've talked about, almost every single week when doing the film study, is teams decide that they're going to run the football, reestablish the line of scrimmage, and play like it's nothing. Like, this is the start of the game. We need to reestablish our plan for the second half. And Penn State's expecting that in the third quarter. And they are on the aggressive. And that's how they get those negative plays and those 3 and outs. And just teams, when they start with a run in the first quarter, it's unbelievably predictable. So what Minnesota did is they threw the ball down the field, not just threw the ball down the field. And I was very impressed with that plan. And then I think it caused Penn State to adapt. But Penn State did adapt. So some of the problems last week were not player driven, and I think that's immediately correctable. And I would expect, a guy who we just learned today is a Broyles Award finalist for one of the top assistant coaches in the country. He made those adjustments after that first drive, and then Penn State went 3 and out, right? And got back on the horse. This team's identity feels, despite that game, intact. And I know that certain fans or certain people will feel differently about that, but the details in this thing to me matter. And so that is, as much as it wasn't good, and it might cause some problems where teams find different ways that Penn State's third quarter defense isn't going to be historically good every single game, I do think that when tested, they adapted pretty well. And then again, the same thing on the offensive side. They had enough ways to pivot in the passing game and adapted enough things in the game. They had enough options to go against Minnesota, which is a good defense, which was frustrating them up front in the run game, and they still were able to close that game out, get points in the second half, get touchdowns, and salt the game away. Close win, not their best game, still, I think, good signs overall from what they did. And again, you can go check out all the details of that at BlueWhiteIllustrated.com.
Penn State will be a big favorite over Maryland on Saturday. We will have our predictions up at Blue White Illustrated on Thursday, so check that out on Turkey Day between meals and the NFL and everything else you got going on. JC asks, we'll close with this. Does a USC win over ND fortify Penn State's position as, again, the 6th seed? So Penn State number 4 in the ranking. The ranking can look different than the seed. Yeah, probably. I think that's the case. I think.
Are there any other challengers that would
not really? I don't think so. Based on how the committee has acted so far, I don't think so. I don't think so. But again, they have proven that they are willing to change logic, previous rationale, previous thought process, etc. during the final 2 weeks. So we'll have to wait and see. I would say better than likely chance that being the case, though. And certainly, I think we're all going to pick Penn State to win. By what margin? You'll have to check that out at BlueWhiteIllustrated.com. T. Frank, do we have, let's do one promo pitch here to join us over at BlueWhiteIllustrated.com. I gotta find the.
Don't do
no,
that.
we don't have that.
Don't
Okay, never mind. Well,
that.
please do anyway. Join us over at BlueWhiteIllustrated.com. Check out our join page for the latest subscription information, and we hope you will do that. We hope you and your family and everyone, friends, have a great Thanksgiving. Safe travels if you're traveling. Happy Thanksgiving Eve if you're participating in that. Certainly, hopefully, everyone's participating in Thanksgiving. T. Frank, I know you will be. I will be. And we will get back to it on Thursday. We'll still have content over on the site, and of course, plenty of Penn State, Maryland coverage as well.
I did this yesterday on the show, and I just, I always want to appreciate the people who make this possible. And, Greg, I think people know how much Greg does, but people don't know how much Greg does. So I just want to say, Greg, to the fact that we have switched this format up for the season, and people have loved this Wednesday show more than they've loved the Wednesday show ever. In its iteration is entirely because you are awesome at hosting it, and that this is a good refresh for what we're doing here. And I always just appreciate how much you do and how willing you are to do a bunch of stuff, including starting a wrestling show that we started last year, going all in on it. And it is the fastest growing thing on our YouTube channel. So if you're a fan of wrestling, you should definitely check it out. It's the same thing. We just flip spots and I ask him questions and he goes off kind of like I ramble on my Sunday film study. He has all the information and it's more concise when he talks about wrestling on that show. So you should definitely check it out if you're a fan of Penn State wrestling and Penn State sports in general.
T. Frank, I appreciate you, buddy. I appreciate all of the listeners here for this edition of the BWI Live show. Happy Thanksgiving to everyone. Enjoy, and remember to stay tuned to BlueWhiteIllustrated.com for the latest on the Nittany Lions. I don't know if we're getting sound here or not, T. Frank, but we'll send it out for this edition of the BWI Live show. That's Thomas Frank Carr. I'm Greg Pickle. Join us for more at BlueWhiteIllustrated.com. We will talk to you soon.